also bring in our experts. Prakash Diwan joins us, also with us, former MP Milind Deora. Prakash, let me come to you first. And, you've heard what Arun has had to say. These could be the reasons behind why the Tata Sons board felt the need to replace Cyrus Mistry. But just to play devil's advocate here, Cyrus Mistry could very well argue, as he has in his letter, that he was left with a lot of legacy hotspots, and perhaps 5 years is not enough to actually be able to deal with some of them, and hence the performance that he has to show.
No, actually. So very clearly, we are talking about two different eras. One, before Cyrus Mistry took charge, it was more of an expansionary era under Ratan Tata, when you had so many acquisitions. And naturally, so after having done that, he was in the consolidation phase of the business. So the parameters would definitely be different, imperatives would be different. And what now they're talking about is not something that's happened overnight. In fact, their reference point is 2013, the dividend was X, and it was whatever, 1,000 crores. Now it's 780. So this has not happened overnight, and they should have taken enough action in between. It doesn't need to kind of come at a time just before, his terms coming to an end or something. But the way it has been handled is what upsets people more than, decision making, I think, Shirin. So that's what the street is not liking, and that too coming from a house like the Tatas. It just doesn't kind of, talk positively of any levels of corporate governance. So my sense is that people will not go too much by the explanation and the counter allegations and all. But it's going to be more of how they decide to resolve this and go ahead with the normal course of business.
Absolutely. And that is going to be critical. Let me also bring in Mr. S.P. Tulsian. Mr. Tulsian, Mr. Ratan Tata met with the LIC chairman this evening. That meeting, we understand, lasted about 40-odd minutes or so, perhaps an hour. This is going to be critical for the Tata Group. Institutional support, getting institutions to back the decision that's been taken now by the Tata Sons board to back Ratan Tata. How crucial will that be to get the institutions on the side of Tata Sons and Ratan Tata specifically?
See, Shirin, if you take any Indian corporates, whether it is Tatas, Birlas or, Vedantas, anyone, the kind of institutional holdings which we have been seeing, and largely if I just focus only on LIC, I don't think that anyone can afford to neglect them and overlook them. And more especially after the companies, amendment to the Companies Act, where the consent of the majority of the non-promoters, because all this will going to see the huge legal litigations and all sort of things, where even the shareholders will start questioning. So you need to present your case, explain your case to the non-promoter major shareholders in that category, because everything will go for the civil and criminal scrutiny, and it is very important. But I don't understand the urgency of presenting your case at this stage, when the fighting within the groups or within the company board is going on. So maybe Ratan Tata is trying to present his case well in advance to have the support of the institutional investors like LIC. But I honestly see this as a futile move, because what kind of assurances, what kind of support, what kind of approvals to your actions you need to have from the institutional investors, unless and until that is put to the vote, because there has to be some agenda where the non-promoter shareholders will be asked to vote. So I'm honestly, when I've seen this news development, honestly it has caused me the anxiety that what may be the point of discussion, what Ratan Tata must have gone and told to LIC that everything is going on well within the group, so no need to worry. I don't think an institutional investors like LIC has to be told all these things, and definitely that will be communicated by the Ratan Tata. So honestly, this seemed to be an immature, early, futile move on part of the Tatas, having met the LIC as an investor in the group company.
Okay, let me also bring in Milind Deora, someone who knows Bombay very well, knows individuals concerned very well. Milind, it's unfortunate the manner in which this is playing out, but where do you think this is finally headed? At this point in time, we're given to understand that legal defences are being put together on both sides, as and when they do decide to move court. The Tatas, of course, have filed a caveat. But do you really see this precipitating into a courtroom battle?
Well, Shireen, at the outset, it's if I were to, speak on behalf of the larger investor community in Mumbai, I think saying that they're very perturbed in the last 3 days would be being extremely generous, because they're absolutely distraught with what's happened to a group that they revered and looked up to, not just in terms of the highest standards of corporate governance, but in terms of the highest standards of basic boardroom etiquette. And I think hearing the two panelists before me, it's really sounding more and more that the Tata board behaved like the board of a family-owned enterprise more than of a professionally owned enterprise, except that they very unceremoniously and very suddenly sacked one of the largest shareholders, which is almost ironic in a sense. And I think it's done a lot of damage to the brand of the Tata Group. And going forward, how would it play out? It would be unfortunate if it became a legal battle. It would be unfortunate if one individual is going to meet institutions to try and buy out the other individual's stake. That would just make things far more ugly. And I think, like any other battle, now I'm putting on my political hat, and if I look at what's happening in politics,
I don't understand that, because how do you actually get institutions? Yeah, but Milind, you know, and I want to get Prakash and Mr. Tulsian to comment on that. I mean, if Shapoorji Pallonji with 18% doesn't want to sell, there's very little that Mr. Tata can do unless either side decides to go to the company law board, and you know, Mr. Mistry decides to go to the company law board, for instance.
That's precisely my point. And I think that going forward, I think the best thing for the group, because ultimately the long-term sufferer is going to be the group's brand image and the kind of confidence that lay investors had in that group. I'm speaking for myself as well. And I think if they could avoid a protracted court and legal battle, if they could avoid a battle that's taking place as we speak now in the public domain through the news media, and actually sit down, and to me it's sounding like it's a battle of egos. The first point that CNBC just broke, and I was hearing your journalist Mr. Giri talking about it, it really sounds like an ego battle, that, you know, here's a structure, proposed structure that I put in place and it wasn't followed in the last 4 years, and it's sounding like a very immature ego battle, that one person is feeling soured in the sense that I brought you into this company, I pulled you out of a flourishing business that you were looking after, I cajoled you to come in and become Tata chairman, and now you didn't follow my way of doing things, and I'm really upset about it. It's sounding like that. I don't know if that's the truth, and ultimately things will play out in the public domain in the next few days. But I would have really expected the board to rise above all of those ego battles and really function like a professional board, like you see overseas in some of the most professionally run companies,
Milind, let me
and
just,
not like a promoter-driven enterprise.
Sure, let me just get your comments on the statement that's coming from the Tatas, and we also got V.R. Mehta, one of the trustees, to corroborate this. It says it's unfortunate that Mr. Mistry had overwhelmingly lost the confidence of the members of the board of directors for a combination of several factors. The directors of the Tata Sons board had repeatedly raised queries and concerns on certain business issues, and trustees of the Tata Trust were increasingly getting concerned with the growing trust deficit with Mr. Mistry, but these were not being addressed. And Mr. Mehta confirming to CNBC TV 18, at least, that yes, queries that the trustees had raised were not adequately responded to by Cyrus Mistry, or not responded at all. So do you believe that there has also been some degree of a communication breakdown on the Mistry end?
Well, perhaps. I think Cyrus Mistry clearly is not, has a different leadership style as his predecessor does. Mr. Tata is no doubt an iconic business figure in this country and around the world, and functioned in a much more flamboyant, visible way versus Cyrus Mistry, who is really a low-key, under-the-radar kind of operator. And that's the way, not just Tata Group, but if you talk to people in South Mumbai, very few people even know that Cyrus Mistry is one of the owners of Tata. The misconception is that Ratan Tata is the majority owner. Nobody really knows where Cyrus or his brother Shapur live. Nobody knows what's happening with Shapoorji Pallonji as a group. So they've maintained a very low-key style of working, and I think that's a good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing. But as I say, the facts of the case in terms of, I just hope, Shireen, that the board took a decision purely based on the merits and demerits of who best can manage the Tata Group, given, you know, the legacy issues and other issues that Cyrus may have inherited, and not based on certain ego battles in terms of you didn't follow my way of functioning and you didn't have my style of leadership. That to me is something which concerns me, and I'm speaking on behalf of the larger investor community, that it concerns everyone, especially those who are investors or who look up to the Tata Group as a beacon of good corporate governance, boardroom etiquette, one of the most professionally run companies in India. Those are the people who are extremely disappointed today, and those are the people, if you're an investor, who are extremely concerned today.
Right. Let me put that last point then to both Prakash Difan and SP Tulsian. Mr. Tulsian, let me start by asking you, and we've seen the erosion as far as market cap is concerned just over the last 2 days after this, after the developments that have broken. But from an investor's point of view, from an institutional investor's point of view, from a minority investor's point of view, what are the key questions, or what would be the key anxieties at this point in time?
Shireen, if you really ask me, I'm really worried, and that each company will now be put to the test of scrutiny by the regulatory authorities. Whether it will start with the Tata Motors, whether you maybe a small point of supplying nano gliders being supplied by Tata Motors to one of the companies in which Ratan Tata is holding 67% stake. Can I tell you really, open a Pandora's box? Number one, I'm just giving the small instances. Maybe 22 crore of the airlines venture can itself, cause a big this thing. Maybe provision of the amount capitalization of 15,000 crore by Tata Motors, whether it conforms to the accounting standards or not. Because if you see the peer balance sheet, I'm giving you the few instances. The list is endless.
Yeah.
Maybe you can question on that. I'm not so much worried on the Tata Power, where the allegations have been raised for the Indonesian coals and all that. But if you see the situations, what has been prevailing in case of Tata Steel, you have been paying a dividend of 80% in case of Tata Steel, in spite of your overseas company, making losses, where there has been impairment losses have not having been booked by the group. You may say on a standalone basis the dividend is paid, but ultimately the consolidated operations of the company has to get considered. Similar is the case with Tata Motors, because of the domestic provisions doesn't allow you to pay the dividend on a standalone basis. In spite of the healthy balance sheet, the 10% dividend has been paid. So I'm just trying to cover all the instances where the 10 points which have been raised by Tata's. Firstly, I'm very astonished to read that the letter which has been issued by Tata's today says that he was aware with the ethos, culture, values of Tata Group. Those things doesn't work in case of a listed company. You are regulated by the laws of the land. You are not, you may be having any ethos, any values, any culture of the group. You have to adhere to the accounting standard laws, and I'm really worried that all these things will, the Pandora's box will get opened, and each company will be put to the test of scrutiny.
Yeah.
Take the case of Sea Rock Hotel having acquired, take the case of Oriental Hotels having sold the property.
Yeah.
Tata Motors, Tata Docomo, Tata Steel.
Valid point you're making. We're out of time. Milind, I want you to quickly respond to that, because these are the murmurs that we're picking up from Delhi, and of course this is all unconfirmed stuff, as I said, that we're picking up on the possibility of probes and regulatory action on part of the government and so on and so forth. But what is your sense? I mean, you were in government. How do you see the government responding? And I'll leave you with what Subramaniam Swamy said to me on the show yesterday. He said Ratan Tata had a hold on even our government, but that no longer is the case.
I don't want to get into what the government should and shouldn't do. I think more facts should come to light before the government should really get involved and intervene in this whole process. I think right now it's really left to the board and an internal dispute between shareholders and the board, and I think the government should not intervene prematurely. That could be a disaster. Just want to respond to what Mr. Tulsian said about ethos, and I think that's something, Shireen, again, I'm talking as a politician now, because we're masters of spin, and we kind of use all these different things to spin things around. And when someone says that a man who's one of the largest shareholders, who owns, as you said, 18% of Tata Sons, and who sat on the board of Tata Sons for 6 years, and then was cajoled into becoming chairman of the group, doesn't share the ethos of the Tata Group, it doesn't add up. That's all I want to say.
All right, Milind Deora, Mr. Tulsian and Prakash, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18. This is, of course, the latest in this story.